This is what happens when you sell your marriage to Mephisto, Peter. This guy becomes the superior Spider-Man. No, not him!
Let's go! 輝くマシンライダージャーライダーキー仮面ライダー仮面ライダーライダーライダー
In 1978, at the behest of Stan Lee and part of a larger character exchange agreement between the two companies, Marvel partnered with Toei to create a live-action series based on the widely popular character of Spider-Man. This series, written by Shozo Uehara and Suzumu Takaku under Toei's collective pen name of Saburo Yatsude, would take many liberties from what was established about the character at that time, mostly because it was in no way tied to the comic's source material, and it would prove itself to be widely popular and successful in that era.
There are a few other details about this, but I'll leave them alone for now, because you really do need to see this series to believe what goes on here.
Unfortunately, that's a bit difficult. While I originally watched this series years ago on Marvel's website, where they had the show in its entirety up for streaming beginning in 2009, they stopped doing such and took them down in 2013. And there have been no official releases for distribution in regions outside of Japan due to rights issues, Toei themselves only having 2 total home releases of the show.
I don't even remember I got the copies I'm using to review this show, but that makes it all the more important to say, Marvel, Toei, bring back Spider-Man. Embrace it, because it is more important than you might think, and there is an audience for the camp silliness of the 70s present in this show.
And yes, I know of Spider-Verse, where this Spider-Man played a short part in its events, and just straight up got their ass handed to them.
Thanks, Dan Slott! Good of you to show respect to something different than what's expected, instead of just making it the punchline of a curb stomp battle. Yeah, this is why I normally don't read comics. Every time I might get the inclination some stupid event happens that trashes what might have been something I would have enjoyed. I get that enough from other media I like. At best, I watch either the cartoons or movies based on them, or internet review shows from those knowledgeable on the content.
And that's in part because I grew up in the 90s, during Western comic books' dark ages, where everyone I came across was, well, garbage. Most of them being drawn by Rob Liefeld, or in his horrifically bad art style by copycats, despite enjoying all of the comic book-based animated series like Batman's, the X-Men, Iron Man, and, yes, Spider-Man's. So there was certainly interest in reading stories about those heroes, but none just were ever really appealing.
Even to this day, the only comics I own that aren't manga are Jaime Reyes' original Blue Beetle run, a few Power Girl trades, Darkstalkers, and Fred Perry's Gold Digger. One of these is not like the other. And with the current state of the medium, and all the stupid things DC and Marvel do that I'm aware of thanks to various friends, yeah, I don't see that changing. My money ultimately needs to go to more important things than books anyways.
So yeah, with all the Western superhero crap going on this year, I thought I'd make my own contribution with reviewing a series that is kind of an oddity even by superhero standards.
Though to be honest, with how silly it gets, it does tell its story decently for the era and for what they tried to include. Besides,
a little nonsense now and then is relished by the wisest men.
So, especially factoring in its age, I'm gonna try and give the show some slack.
Still, one can't help but love Stan Lee for pushing for this. Hell, in the Toku community he's known for, after Sentai was given second life with Battle Fever, trying but failing to get a few Sentai series imported and adapted. And this was before Haim Saban likewise came up with the idea after Bioman, or succeeded with Zyuranger.
And yet this show never features a Stan Lee cameo. They're so ubiquitous these days that I was so disappointed.
Though I should also mention that the English translation for the series is not great. A lot of monster names are straight up wrong, as are various locations, and assorted cultural elements are also in the mistranslation list, on top of the series being pretty extensively censored. You'll understand the series as it's not actually awful, but there's much to be desired, and this has contributed to this show's reputation of being utterly insane. The opening theme is Kakarot, Spider-Man, by Yuki Hide, and it tells you what it's about straight away.
Spider-Man!
And boy is this goofy, and its silliness is kind of fun. I don't know why, possibly because there wasn't a blueprint for better content yet, but I tend to like Showa series, as repetitive and formulaic as they can get. So many of them show an honest enthusiasm towards telling their stories that is comparatively absent in later ones. Even with lacking production values, that's reflected in this opening. The song itself is pretty simple, asking why the title character is giving up his personal peace, which is made pretty damn clear by the events of the first episode.
Now, as said, I'm trying to give this show slack. It was made in the 70s after all, but goddamn does it start off feeling like a knockoff of the collected works of Shotaro Ishinomori.
Two groups of individuals see a spaceship approaching Earth. The first a cyborg with a ripoff of Wonder Woman.
There. Sure glad I don't look stupid in this.
The second a scientist and his daughter assistant. The latter pair are Professor Yamashiro and his daughter Shinko, relatives of our protagonist Takia Yamashiro, played by Shinji Todo.
Oh, this is perfect. Hang on, I need to prepare the punchline.
And Takia is a professional racer.
Oi!
Who is out training with his photographer girlfriend Hitomi, and Takia's little brother Takuji.
I hope you can see where this is going.
However, during this, he somehow hears the distress calls of the man calling the ship to Earth, which confuses him just as the ship crashes. The cyborg, Professor Monster, instantly sends his forces out to try and claim the ship. These forces members of the Iron Cross Army.
And you see what I mean about this? They really were not even trying to be subtle. Black Cross Army? Iron Cross Army?
I mean, come on! It's even led by the Black Cross Fuhrer himself from Go Ranger. Both characters are played by Mitsuo Ando.
To be fair, the Iron Cross Army lacks the obvious Nazi allegory for the villains that was present in many of Ishinomori's works and goes their own way with them.
So meine ganze Macht spüren, Siegeskettensäger!
Mainly because Professor Monster clearly was inspired visually by Dr. Doom, but they never achieved the same level of evil that had been inspired by those who acted as monsters.
Though to swing back the other way on that, Monster is a scientist that likes making monsters with intent on world domination! And to that end, he sends his chief and only general, Amazoness, yes, seriously, to go after those who might be able to learn the secrets of the ship. Specifically, Professor Yamashiro.
I call bad now! Wait.
Takia's father, as he lays dying, tells him of the Iron Cross and to avenge him, but it might have been wiser artistically for him to see who was responsible for murdering him, connect the act a bit deeper by seeing it committed, have guilt at not being able to stop the act being a motivator for the actions that would follow, like the original Spider-Man.
Or for that matter, the origin story they're paralleling with all this. V3s, and by proxy X's. Hey, just because I think they're ripping off Ishinomori in context, the pilot, doesn't mean them diverging from that can't be stupid if it wastes its drama and storytelling potential.
And honestly, it'd fill the plot hole of why they then come back and go after Takia based on the ramblings he was told from a dying man with no proof. Had the family been left alone past that, no evidence, no enemy. Though that'd mean no show. Instead, the foot soldiers, called Ninders,
though I will be calling them ducks because, come on, with that face mask, they look like ducks!
Chase him into falling into a cave network, encountering...
Do you happen to know who won the last Super Bowl? I've got 2,000 yen on Dallas.
This is Garia, an alien from the planet Spider, yes, seriously, that followed Professor Monster to Earth after his own planet was devastated by the cyborg. I'd say conquered, but he didn't. Thing is, Gary is kind of an idiot, as he spent the last 400 years trapped in this cave after he sent his spaceship, Marveler, again seriously, back into space instead of getting it to help him. Since then, he's invented this awesome, superpowered spider bracelets that could have gotten him out of the cave at any time and searching for a successor to fight the Iron Cross. But instead has spent his time bumming around with poisonous spiders because he wants revenge.
我が400年の恨み晴らしてくれ
Revenge, the most worthless of causes.
And as such, he straps the spider bracelet onto the critically wounded Takia, saving his life, and giving him superpowers, all thanks to the injected spider extract. Garya himself takes this opportunity to die.
I'll kill bad now. Wait.
Leaving behind a small mentor spider that dies in the next episode. So after being a morose a bit back home, his superpowers kick in, which alert him to the Iron Cross activity, meaning equip!
The hard part is getting the costume back into it.
And yet, this whole origin story has been done with more dignity than the manga-verse Spider-Man of the Spider Clan. That was a real thing Marvel made!
And you know what? That is not a bad Spider-Man suit. It's not up to par with something you'd see made for any of the movies. But for a TV budget, it's pretty damn accurate. Takia learns that Iron Cross has abducted a nuclear scientist because... science, and intercedes to fight off the Ducks with his superior agility and wall crawling which baffles them.
Then again, it doesn't take much to outwit a duck.
Wabbit season! Duck season! Fire!
But Amazonas calls for backup from the series Monsters of the Week, the machine BAM. And I have no idea what BAM stands for. It almost immediately goes giant in a pretty bad process shot. Though Takia initially tries to fight it as he is, the result is as you would expect. Actually, considering this was still the 70s, the effects for small man on giant man aren't that bad. I'd say it at least matched the Commodore X vs. King Dark fight from 1974. But no, outmatched, Takia calls out to the ship, with Marveler rising from the earth, and sending his personal car, the Spider Machine GP7, to shuttle him to the ship.
And thus, finally, it is time. Get into the fucking robot, Shinji!
Marvel! Change Leopard!
Robots.
Yeah, we can credit this thing to Bandai. Well, actually, it was Poppy, a toy company eventually absorbed into Bandai. See, transforming robots were selling like crazy in the 70s, so they suggested a giant robot to the production team to be included in the show.
They wrote it in, Leopardon becoming one of the first giant robots piloted by a hero in live-action television. However, it caused producer Toru Hirayama to step down from his position at Toei, as he saw the genre being corrupted with merchandising gimmicks more than things that were needed to tell the story.
And to this day, it is still a valid critique. Yes, toyetic items can be a hindrance if you shove too many of them in, or the show doesn't utilize them properly in the narrative. However, as expenses for production have only risen with time as relatedly revenue that can be gained from ratings has fallen, they are a necessary evil to continue propagation of the genre, and merchandising has saved shows from falling beyond notice. The question thus becomes, as I've stated before, whether or not they are integrating these trinkets well into the story. Do they have a purpose? Are they developed properly? Do they at points help drive the story, or do they take it over and detract from the overall presentation? It can vary quite a lot, as I've shown in prior reviews, so it's hard to take a definite position without having loads of exceptions. And completely writing all of it off just shows one ignorance of what it can add. So it's something I've found more and more needs to be considered on a case-by-case basis. Except the Zordoli armors in Neospawn Power Rangers. I will not budge on my position that those damn things are not practical and add nothing at all to the story, so are thus asinine.
However, Leopardon's inclusion did make it a historical landmark as one of the first, and certainly the most popular television shows, to do live-action giant robot battles. The only other competition for Daikaiju fights was Tsuburaya with the Ultra Series, and the two were stylistically pretty different in execution, so Toei and Tsuburaya never felt like there was a definite overlap in their executions of such.
But the problem that happened with Leopardon, however, was twofold. First, the monster costumes in the Leopardon suit were built to differing scales due to Toei's unfamiliarity with constructing such costumes. Not helped that the Machine Bem suits are... let's face it, a lot of them are crap even by 70s standards.
This is shown in episode 8, with Leopardon literally towering over the normal man-sized suit, thus explaining why during all the early battles you never see Leopardon in the same frame as the Monster of the Week, because it would look ridiculous for one to be so much larger than the other and not be some sort of ubermech like, say, King Pyramider, the Decabase, or Engine OG-12 that are supposed to be so much larger than the Monster of the Week. Not helped that because of that scale and other structural problems, Leopardon was difficult for the suit actor to move in. Thus, the action scenes they shot for it over time became cyclical stock footage because that was the best they could do.
Though it's annoying in how some of the later sequences played a new clip of Marveler's engines converting into Leopardon's legs completely wrong every time, as they played the clip backwards. See? They're converting from legs into the engines and their flight mode. Editing fail! But the scenes all being effectively stock footage actually proved to be advantageous because, well, they lost parts of the suit. I've heard of different ways in how they were lost, either straight up misplaced, pieces being stolen, or being damaged and discarded, but it's pretty common knowledge that they never replaced them during production and were eventually without a suit to use. Instead, they decided to save money and just use the stock footage they had and recut it for the battles against the giant monsters they were still filming, despite the absence of Leopardon.
This made apparent as early as the 10th episode of the show, only the 4th of the way in, and the giant robot they were asked to include in the show instead became dead weight. Later episodes in the series reducing the giant monster brawl to just Leopardon killing it with his sword vigor attack, the only attack Spider-Man uses that actually kills anything. I've heard accounts that the action scenes were being cut down on anyway so they could have more time for the main episode drama over the final fight, but ultimately since the lost suit parts exactly coincides with that shift, it may be a chicken and egg kind of thing in where one necessitated the other. And now, when looking back on it, yeah, Leopardon does detract from the show, but only because of the parts loss not allowing them to do much with it, especially as we've had so many shows that have done such better over the last 38 to 40 years. Not every, looking at you, Ninja, but most.
I'd ask why they didn't just commission replacement parts or write it out of the show for a time, since shooting the giant monster balls had to be an expense in and of itself, and the giant monster balls were kind of the weakest aspects of the show due to Toei's unfamiliarity with them. But fortunately, this gave them the experience needed when this all would be done in Sentai the following year.
The only other good thing that came of this was Leopardon gained the reputation of it being the ultimate invincible robot within its own narrative, and by proxy Toei's entire canon, since very little of that stock footage was of it struggling in battle, and thus it has never once been defeated. Oh goddammit!
Seriously, Dan Slott, what the hell? Yes, I know it got fixed later in the Spider-Verse event, and was considered by many to be one of its highlights. It's still rude as presented!
Professor Monster isn't happy at this, with Spider-Man swearing that he'll keep fighting, all for the sake of...
The Revenge Society!
Spider-Man starts... I'm sorry, but initially, even with Leopardon, it really feels like a watered-down version of V3's origin story. I've sourced enough clips to show the parallels, and there are others.
Now, some might say, well, maybe the writer here wrote that origin, and... no. The writers for Spider-Man, as I said, were Shozo Uehara and Susumu Takaku, while V3's major story arc episodes and a lot of other Showa writer content were written by Masaru Igami, Toshiki Inoue's father.
Yeah, I was surprised to learn that. Again, taking inspiration from a past success isn't a bad thing, but it's rare they didn't hit the same notes. Fortunately, this did not continue for the rest of the show.
Now, I've got to admit, there's kind of a problem with the copies I have of the series episodes, and it's one that goes back to when the show was streaming on Marvel's website. There is a massive audio desync issue in the first 10 to 12 of them. About halfway through each of the affected, the words and sound effects stop matching the action on screen.
ガリア、鉄十字団が動き出しているんだな。
For those not familiar, this is a common error found when someone improperly converts a video file. Frame rate settings are screwed up, so the conversion skips a fraction of a second from the source footage, which makes the video play imperceptibly faster, but the rate the audio plays at didn't change, so over time it lags behind. Every English-translated copy of the affected episodes that's still around on the web has this exact same issue, as they are all sourced from the exact same damaged video files. At the very least, it only affects a quarter of the show.
Episode 2 is somewhat a follow-up to the first, but not mandatory. Just beginning the first of the Machine Ben plots with the monster using recent weather to cover it overturning trains, with Hitomi pestering Takia to help her out in an effort to get him out of the funk of his father dying. While Hitomi's mostly a photographer, spoiling that job from mainline Peter Parker, she also has been working to become a full-time reporter with the support of her boss, Saiko Yoshida.
And yes, that is Amazonas in a civilian cover identity paralleling J. Jonah Jameson, though I'm surprised Jameson never actually graduated to active villain in the comic series. But this is one of the things I really like about this show. Her execution as a general, at least in the first half, is pretty damn well done.
As not only does Hitomi have a penchant for accidentally uncovering Iron Cross activities so it's a way to silence potential leaks, witnesses, and deserters they may not be aware of, but due to her repeatedly being saved by Spider-Man after the initial attempts to get rid of her, Amazonas shifts focus and secretly turns Hitomi into a double agent without Hitomi even knowing. She keeps tabs on her, so anytime Spider-Man helps out someone they need to get rid of, or need to lead Spider-Man into a trap, she assigns Hitomi something that tangentially relates to what she needs done, and just have the minions track her to get to what they want. And since Hitomi keeps investigating Iron Cross activities anyways, Takia never realizes any of this, as such as being overshadowed by the presence of the more immediate threats. Hell, this aspect of the story actually validates how Takia ends up keeping his double identity secret from his loved ones. For due to that surveillance, the Iron Cross would learn he's Spider-Man the second Hitomi would learn it from him.
If you'll remember, my recurring critique of Showa Kamen Rider series was that, no matter how entertaining and interesting the stories, monsters, and situations may have been, anything helmed by the great leader of Shocker was doomed to failure due to his own idiocy mucking up the work of his more intelligent but subservient generals. Here, Professor Monster, since he is a scientist and not a great military commander, lets Amazonas have a bit more freedom of activity so that, yeah, their plans still fail, but they have in place a system that allows them more intelligence on their enemies and ways to attempt subverting them, and handled in a way that just one bad plan would require them to completely abandon that resource, which shows them as intelligent villains in the execution of their schemes. Though the jury is still out on whether the plans themselves are all that smart, since so many of them are small-time acts for an advanced force of world conquerors.
And it also covers Takia's actions, where instead of manning up and standing tall against enemies that already know his secret identity anyways, just not transforming in front of civilians so he won't be hounded at all times like was done with a lot of the Showa Rider heroes, he regularly pretends to be a lot more of a wimp and klutz than he is, much as his original counterpart would do the same at times, which helps create a parallel between the two sides. Though as a consequence, this does result in him coming to be seen as immature and unreliable to his siblings and girlfriend, made worse that his prioritization in fighting Iron Cross prevents him from earning money from participating in his racing career. A few odd jobs seen in the show act as replacements for this so he can support his family, but mostly it's just becoming Hitomi's lackey and temp work before the entire subplot is dropped halfway through the series. Anyways, their investigation eventually turns up a witness just as he's murdered, telling that the suspect is a giant brain?
Of course! This is clearly the machinations of the brain spawn!
With that knowledge, and his first rescue of Hitomi, which helps introduce him to the nation as a hero, he uses his spider sense to track down the Iron Cross and stop the brain spawn from knocking over another train, this one loaded with highly explosive jet fuel. though this fight is pretty jaggedly edited, such only slightly improving over the series.
And if you're expecting a coda after each episode that properly wraps its events, prepare to be disappointed. It's rare that there's more than a narrated segment encouraging Takia, like most Showa heroes, to keep fighting for the sake of justice, or family, or red Kool-Aid, or some other such crap. It's why over time the Leopardon brawls began to detract from the show, as once you reach the point the monster goes giant, you can pretty much skip the rest of the episode as nothing else happens in each story, meaning many of them have no resolution, despite the show insisting there is.
Now, again, the interim of the episode is nonetheless entertaining and decently executed. It's just the inability to properly close out a story much of the time is another in the list of flaws the show has that kept it from being more outstanding in comparison to other works of the decade. Next, a thief finds his mark has already been pilfered and ends up arrested, a Bem breaking him out and whisking him away with the assistance of his flashing eyes causing blindness. Not to even say what it does to the sperm count. Eat Laserface, Spidey! Cyclops ain't got nothing on me! Ironcross brainwashes the thief into thinking he's Spider-Man, vandalizing all of the places he hits to pin Takia as the true perpetrator, thus turning a fledgling hero into public enemy number 1!
J. Jonah Jameson must be having a fun day at the office.
しまった。遅かったか。
P.S. Ben Reilly is a loser.
This is also to try and draw Spider-Man out, and it does work, but in a way that Spidey gets through to the thief, who reveals his thefts were to fund his own circus where he could perform as an acrobat.
You know, those performers are not that ubiquitous. Could you really not just audition to an existing troupe?
However, as the final confrontation happens during the day, the Bem's blinding power is rendered unusable, as it needed the contrast between night and day on unadjusted eyesight for its ability to work, and obviously can't blind a giant robot.
I stand corrected.
In once more a show of early series competency, and once more echo a Showa Kamen Rider plot, Professor Monster has a computer tabulate all the data they have on Spider-Man to try and create a plan to get rid of him, or find out his identity, which begins with a contrivance of putting out an obituary for him, which Takia just so happens to see.
I wonder what would have happened had he not read the paper that day.
Regardless, that sends him and Hitomi on a wild goose chase, which only really serves to turn the woman into a hostage in an attempt to trap Takia, which admittedly does succeed, the spider being dropped into a cell with the fishman sporting wicked arm blades that Takia ends up evading, so the fishman cuts open their own trap. Whoops. To be fair, even those would have been effective since, unlike most Showa heroes, his suit doesn't have any form of protection against damage. Takia's version of the Spider-Man costume, even in universe, is just plain old cloth like his source counterpart.
Hell, he doesn't even have any kind of padding or insulation on his feet. Suit actor Hirofumi Koga must have had some severe pain in his, considering some of the places they shot scenes at.
But with Hitomi still captured, he needs to re-engage the fishman. But when they next try to drown him, a hallucination causes him to grasp a randomly hanging vine, which saves him from death. Deus Ex Machina is go! Next, the Bem Shanjinju raids a military base, stealing a bunch of missiles, with Takia immediately pursuing.
しまった。別なトラックにすり替えられた。
When?
However, the warehouse they used to store the munitions is accidentally uncovered by a homeless kid named Ichiro, who ran away from the orphanage he was stuffed in after his parents died, and only isn't killed via vehicular manslaughter thanks to him running into Takia as he's searching for the stolen weapons. He's injured during this, Takia donating his own blood to save the boy's life, with Ichiro in turn thanking him by giving him the details to take care of the Iron Cross plot. This proves to be one of the few episodes with proper closure, encouraging the kid to return to the orphanage, as he would be better cared for than he would be on the street.
一郎君、君を引き殺そうとしたトラックはやっつけた。
How? I stepped on it with a giant robot. Yay!
In episode 6, Amazonas and the Ducks have a bit of sport with some escapees. Though it's not very sporting with them in trucks and sporting AR-15s. The only survivor of the death game turns out to be an old friend of Takia's, named Yosuke, for some plot convenience playhouse. He reveals that Professor Monster has been experimenting with reviving the dead as his minions in a Frankenstein gambit, and has been snatching up those near death as a means to figure out the bridge.
And
clearly a roboticist.
This is how Yosuke got caught, as he was fatally wounded, then saved after a hiking accident months back, and since has faced death again and again.
So, can we have you as the replacement for Kamen Rider Ghost then?
Takia contacts Yosuke's former girlfriend Junko and hides him so he'll be safe from Amazona's searches, which leads to an amusing subversion where Takia realizes he's under surveillance by both Hitomi because Amazonas assigned her to, and Amazonas because she doesn't want to wait and learn things secondhand, thus spends his day acting like a total buffoon as part of selling his public identity as completely worthless.
Well, if that's the case, just have your boss call up Baseball Mask. He must still have him on speed dial. He's the most popular Go Ranger monster. And he's totally not Spider-Man! Nope, this dork's definitely not superhero material.
What do you take us for? Fools?
Unfortunately, despite the distraction, Amazonas eventually captures Junko as she's getting supplies to help Yosuke, which get the man out of hiding, to summarily die to protect the one he loves. Ironically, protecting Yosuke's life was the only reason Takia hadn't gone after the base yet, infiltrating using his spider powers with no one the wiser.
Holy crap, Spidey's packing heat! Where the hell did he get a machine gun in Japan?
And apparently the base design is so fragile that gunfire is all it takes to get it to blow. Convenient! In episode 7, the Iron Cross Army attacks Spider-Man by revealing the hills are alive with the sound of music.
I knew it! Dubstep is the tool of the devil!
Yeah, as I have discussed before, I have ridiculously sensitive hearing. So this episode, about Professor Monster replacing a popular band with androids, not cyborgs as the subtitles say, and then using a wavelength amplifier tuned to torture spiders, which in turn leaves Takia in agony.
Well, I don't exaggerate in saying that I was sympathizing with Takia every time he got hit with that attack, because I was right there with him writhing in the pain. It got so bad I just turned off the audio for the episode.
This is all a distraction so the Iron Cross can steal, what was it called again?
スペクトル光波探知装置を密かに早乙女博士と村井所長が開発中であった。
How would detecting sound waves find the Iron Cross? Wait, right, they set up their bases in out-of-place locales.
And it's ironically an out-of-place locale after several musical numbers. Anyways, it's out by that wood bridge Toei likes to do location shoots at, away from the awful music. That he's free from the torture music so he can defeat the machine Bem. And then I guess the android replacements for the band that made that awful song are just dealt with off-screen. At a shrine, a group of ducks perform grave robbing on an, let's just say, an odd corpse.
Except Felicia Hardy didn't appear until Amazing Spider-Man 194 the following year. How do I know that?
Apparently this is the corpse of a demon cat that killed over a dozen people in the 1800s before being cut down by a samurai ancestor of Takia's. And Professor Monster wants to turn it into a robot.
The true origins of Fazbear Entertainment.
Takia and Hitomi learn of the evil demon cat from the crazy cat lady that manages the shrine that was grave robbed, with the woman subsequently killed after they brush her off, and just as she was going to reveal the demon cat's weakness, too. But that's okay. Amazonas can spell it for her when she tells the cat that it can't have any human blood until it kills Spider-Man.
So wait, it'll get weaker and die if it doesn't drink blood. That's vampires, by the way. And you're sending it into a battle that it will need to be at full strength for.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
But yeah, Crazy Cat Lady gets sent to Crazy Cat Lady Heaven, her body thus covered in cats.
Now let me set you down so you can go back to eating her.
However, the true weakness the old woman alluded to was a special charm statue, which removes the black cat's remaining lives and sends it back to Kitty Cat Hell.
よく見ろ、アマゾネス。これが世界に二つとない。
Especially after that rebellion from Homeworld.
He installs it into Machine Ben Kabuto, giving it an insanely powerful laser attack. It's changed into a normal Kabuto beetle and placed in range of Takuchi, who is indulging in the traditional Japanese activity of catching insects in order to make them fight each other, allowing it proximity with the Yamashiro family, all so it can be close to Shinko and stop her from continuing her father's research into a device that can detect meteorites.
And this would be a concern to the Iron Cross Army. Why?
Unfortunately, despite having an energy attack that can reach the speed of light, apparently Takia can momentarily clock up, and dodges the blast so it hits a mirror and reflects back on the Bugman. The other Bugman.
I can name a few.
However, this is where the episode gets really damn weird.
How weird? Well, how familiar are you with the works of the White Stripes? And yet, this is still a better love story than Twilight.
It concludes how you would expect it to. Ben Kabuto giving Shinko his sapphire, replacing a fake gem Taki got her for her birthday because he's perpetually broke, and because of that, his laser is pretty much worthless. Amusingly, that act also saved Shinko from Amazonas trying to kill her, due to the special properties of a sentient polymorphic gemstone that could turn into a giant woman. So even though Ben Kabuto may have been a monster, at his end, just like Spidey, he was ultimately a hero. The meteor research thing is followed up on in episode 10.
What? Active use of continuity in a mid-70s Showa series?
Inconceivable!
This one really gives context to why they wanted something that detects meteors, for as Taki is flipping through his father's old notebooks, he finds documentation about a meteorite fragment that he and his colleagues uncovered that is ridiculously radioactive. And Iron Cross wanting it? That can't be good! The rock was hidden by their father's colleague, Kitazawa, who he and Shinko attempt to contact.
Yes, he received word of some monoliths that create space babies.
Unfortunately, the caretaker of his facility turns out to be the monster of the week who murdered him as the Iron Cross hunted for the meteorite. Shinko discovering this the following evening, with Takia just only preventing her from dying due to vehicular manslaughter. With Shinko in the hospital following this, it leaves him blind to the actual perpetrator, who he leads right to his sister. Yep, he plotted a counter-trap to draw her out, and with the identity now known, he can follow her back to the secret base of the week, as they found the meteorite off-screen and installed it into a space laser. Though we get something of a paradigm shift with the final scenes of the episode this time. Marveler being used to blow up the space laser before it becomes part of a fully operational battle station, while the Snake Woman burns to death. I really cannot imagine a more painful way to go at this specific moment.
Next time, we will continue our look at Toei's Spider-Man with its theatrical feature. Yeah, it's canon.